Her voice trembled as she begged me to save her car keys from the gutter. I knelt to help, not knowing that the woman in front of me was the same executive who'd just crushed my future hours earlier. The morning we crossed the city line, the sky looked like a clean slate. Wide, pale, a little too bright, as if it had been washed overnight. Liam had his face pressed to the window, counting red trucks the way he did when he got nervous. We'd packed our whole life into the back of a used SUV and a rented trailer. Labeled boxes, a dented coffee maker, 2 folding chairs, and a cardboard rocket Liam had built out of duct tape and hope. "Dad, that one's number 8, he said, pointing. 9 if you count the fire engine. Fire engines are bonus points, I told him. They're basically red trucks that lift heavy things. He nodded like that made perfect sense. I envied him. At 8, he still believed in rules that held. I was 34 and trying to believe in one. If you work hard, prepare well, and show up with something that solves a real problem, someone will see you. That was the rule I had repeated under my breath while we drove through 3 states and 2 thunderstorms. The one I rehearsed while I fine-tuned my deck in motel lobbies. The one I clung to when I told my son we were moving because Dad had a big opportunity. He didn't ask what opportunity meant. He just said, "Will there be a basketball hoop?" I promised we'd find one. The apartment was a second-floor walk-up over a laundromat that breathed out warm, soapy air all day. The hallway smelled like detergent and coins. Inside, the place was small but clean. 2 rooms, sun coming in sideways, a kitchen with cupboards that clicked if you closed them too hard. Liam walked the perimeter with that serious expression he has, like a tiny building inspector, then stood in the middle of the empty living room and spread his arms. "It echoes," he said, grinning. "That means it's waiting for our stuff." I answered and set a box on the floor. We worked in quiet rhythm. He carried pillows and light things. I hauled the heavy ones. Every time I passed the window, I could see the reflection of my tie hanging on the closet knob. I'd ironed it the night before at the motel, using a bath towel as a board. The tie was my reminder. Tomorrow I'd be in a boardroom, not a laundromat hallway. Tomorrow I'd show the prototype and the numbers. Tomorrow someone would listen. Around noon, I took Liam to the diner on the corner. The waitress wore a name tag that said Rita and had the tired kindness of someone who's poured a million coffees and still cares if yours is hot. Liam ordered pancakes shaped like a spaceship. I got eggs and a second cup of courage. "You nervous?" he asked, mouth already sugared. "A little," I said. "Nervous just means you're awake." He considered that. "Like right before the roller coaster drops." "Exactly," I said, and tried not to picture us dropping. Back at the apartment, I opened the box with my demo kit. The tablet that ran the route optimizer, a battery pack, the mock courier app printed on foam boards. My startup was simple to describe and hard to build. Smart dispatching for small outfits. A way to cut wasteful miles without treating drivers like disposable parts. I'd driven a delivery route long enough to learn what the spreadsheets missed. The school zone that doubles your time on Tuesdays. The back gate a warehouse forgets to mention. The way a single left turn across a 4-lane at 4:30 p.m. can ruin your whole schedule. My algorithm learned those things. It paid attention the way people do when their paycheck actually depends on it. Liam traced one of my foam boards with a finger. "Is this the map that changes?" "Yep," I said. "It changes to make the day easier. Do you think they'll like it?" His voice was small, like a secret he was lending me. "I think they'll get it," I said. "And if they don't, we'll show them again." We built his bed, then mine. Evenings softened the windows. The laundromat hummed below like an old friend singing off-key. I made spaghetti on the tiny stove and burned the first batch of garlic bread. We ate anyway, sitting on boxes that said kitchen and winter. After dinner, he practiced free throws with a balled-up sock and the laundry basket. On his 4th shot, he shouted Kobe, even though he was years too young to remember. Grief moves in strange lines. I let the name hang in the air without correcting it. At 8, he brushed his teeth and crawled into bed, dragging Rocket Box, what he called the taped-up cardboard ship, to the foot of the mattress. I tucked him in and turned off the lamp. The laundromat's neon open sign glowed red through our blinds, and for a second I wished for blackout curtains and a different past. He yawned. "You're gonna do great tomorrow," he said, in that clear, unearned confidence kids offer the people they trust. "Because you always practice, and you know all the shortcuts." I smiled in the dark. Shortcuts are just long cuts we've already learned from. He didn't respond, which meant he was half asleep. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened to his breathing even out. There are moments you catalog without trying. The weight of a tiny hand on your wrist, the sound of a soft snore, the way the city outside keeps moving and your whole world holds still. When he was out, I went to the kitchen table, opened the laptop, and clicked through my deck one more time. The numbers were clean. The pilot results from 2 small courier shops back home were honest and better than I'd dared to hope. Fewer miles, on-time rates up, drivers going home earlier. I'd taken pictures, smiling men and women in neon vests, hands up like they'd just won a game. I kept those slides near the end. People remember faces. At 11, I tied the tie to the closet knob again, old habit, and laid out my shirt, clean but not new. I set 2 alarms. I wrote a note for us on a post-it. Breakfast at Rita's. Big day. I stuck it to the fridge next to Liam's drawing of us inside Rocket Box, heading toward a yellow star that said new job. Sleep came slow, like a train taking the long curve into the station. When it finally pulled in, I dreamed of streets I didn't know yet and doors that opened when you knocked. In the morning, I woke before my alarms. The sky looked the same as yesterday, washed, bright, like another try. Liam sat up, hair pointing north, and blinked. "Dad," he asked, "is today the day?" "Today's the day," I said. His grin could have lit the hallway without the neon. We ate toast and eggs at Rita's. She topped off my coffee without asking and slid Liam a second orange juice for good luck. On the way out, she wiped her hands on a towel and said, "You got this, honey." I thanked her like she was on the board of directors. Outside the headquarters building, the glass was so clean it held the sky. I checked in at the desk. The lobby smelled like lemon and ambition. Elevator mirrored doors. 30 seconds to the floor where men in very good suits made decisions that changed other people's rent. I thought about my son's drawing on our fridge, the boxy rocket stuck to a star. I thought about all the long cuts I'd learned. I thought about the rule, show up with something real, and someone will see you. When the elevator chimed and the doors opened, I stepped out into a hallway that looked like money moves quiet. I straightened my tie and followed the signs toward Conference A. A woman in a tailored suit waited there with a tablet. She looked up when she heard my footsteps. Her face didn't say yes or no. It said something I wouldn't understand until later, until rain and a storm drain, and a pair of keys glinting in the dark. "Mr. Walker?" she asked. "Yes," I said, and held my deck a little closer to my chest, like maybe it could hear my heart and calm it down. "Right this way," she said and turned. I followed. The conference room was colder than it needed to be, the kind of cold that made you question your choice of shirt. The walls were white, the table glass, and the coffee machine in the corner gurgled like it was trying to fill the silence. I'd been early, 10 minutes early, to be exact. I always believed being early said something about you. The woman who'd met me at the elevator, Helen's assistant, I'd later learn, sat across the table, tapping on a tablet. She hadn't looked at me since I sat down. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and new carpet. I straightened the folder in front of me. My slides were lined up, the numbers checked twice. I'd rehearsed every possible question in my head: delivery routes, scaling, data accuracy, potential integration. I was ready for curiosity, even skepticism. What I wasn't ready for was indifference. After a few long minutes, she finally looked up. Her expression was professional, polite in the way that meant no. "Mr. Walker," she said, "thank you for coming in. I wanted to reach out sooner, but the board made some decisions about resource allocation for the quarter." That sentence already sounded like a funeral announcement. "What kind of decisions?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. She folded her hands, tablet resting neatly beside her. "Unfortunately, we won't be moving forward with your proposal at this time. Leadership felt the concept didn't align with our immediate priorities." I waited for the but, the small consolation every rejection hides behind, but it didn't come. "I understand," I said slowly. "Could you tell me what changed since last month?" "The feedback from your data division was positive." Her polite smile didn't move an inch. "Yes, the analysis was solid, but the focus has shifted. We're moving in a different direction." A different direction. That phrase should have been trademarked by corporate America. I could almost hear the rubber stamp hit the paper. I glanced at the tablet on the table. My presentation file was open, half-scrolled through, untouched. The logo I designed, the clean blue and white layout, the tagline Liam had helped me come up with. We make distance work for people. It looked small, almost childish on that screen. I see, I said quietly. Thank you for letting me know. She nodded, the conversation already over in her eyes. I'm sure another opportunity will come along for you, Mr. Walker. You have an interesting background. Interesting background, another polite grave. I gathered my papers, careful not to drop them. The room felt colder than when I came in. My tie suddenly seemed too tight. She offered me a handshake, the kind that lasts exactly 1 second, no more, no less. I took it because walking out angry never fixes anything. In the hallway, I passed people in sleek suits, talking in clipped phrases and moving fast, like they all knew exactly where they belonged. I pressed the elevator button and stared at my reflection in the glass wall opposite. My reflection looked fine, presentable, calm, but the man inside my skin felt hollowed out. When the elevator opened, I stepped in alone. The doors slid shut with a whisper, sealing off the world where my name had just become an inconvenience. Outside, the afternoon sun was too bright. The heat hit me like a wall as I crossed the parking lot, tie loosened, jacket over my arm. I stopped by the car and just stood there for a moment, breathing. There was a FedEx van parked across the street, engine idling, driver sorting packages in the back. For a second, I envied him. At least he knew what came next. Back home, Liam was sitting on the floor, building something with his toy blocks. He looked up when I walked in. How'd it go? I hesitated, then smiled the way fathers do when the truth would sting too much. They liked it, I said, but they're not ready for it yet. He frowned a little. So, not yet doesn't mean no, right? Right? I said, kneeling beside him. Not yet just means later. He seemed to accept that. Kids are generous that way. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open to a blank job site page. The cursor blinked at me, patient and judgmental. I searched for logistics coordinator, route planner, operations assistant. Nothing near what I'd built, but close enough to keep food on the table. When the listing for FedEx popped up, I almost laughed. It wasn't a dream, but it was work. Honest work. I filled out the application, attached my old resume, and clicked submit. Then I looked around the apartment. The boxes were still stacked in the corner. The tie hung where I'd left it, still neatly knotted, waiting for a better day. Before turning off the lights, I glanced at the fridge. Liam's drawing. Our cardboard rocket headed toward a yellow star, still smiled back at me. The star said new job. Not yet, I murmured. But we'll get there. I didn't know then that the road to there would start with a package, a storm drain, and a woman who'd once decided my idea wasn't worth her time. The first day at FedEx didn't feel like defeat. It felt like survival wearing someone else's name tag. They handed me a purple and gray uniform, a scanner that already had more scratches than my laptop, and a route sheet with 32 stops. The manager, a man named Rick with kind eyes and a caffeine problem, gave me the rundown like I was joining the infantry. You don't have to be fast, just accurate, he said. Fast comes after your first paycheck. I nodded, holding onto that line like it was a proverb. By 8:30, I was behind the wheel of a dented delivery van that smelled like cardboard and effort. The city looked different from this seat. Not the skyline of opportunity I'd imagined when we first arrived, but a maze of driveways, doorbells, and parking lots. Still, there was rhythm in it. The sound of sliding doors, scanner beeps, the weight of packages shifting in the back. At stop number 7, a woman with 3 dogs signed for her box and said, "At least it's not raining." I smiled, because small talk was part of the job, and kept moving. By noon, I'd memorized the streets. The muscle memory kicked in. Park, grab, deliver, repeat. Somewhere between the repetition and the silence, I realized I was still problem-solving, just on a smaller scale. Logistics was logistics, even if the cargo was Amazon boxes instead of dreams. The funny thing was, my brain didn't stop working on the startup. Every time I hit a traffic delay or a customer wasn't home, I thought, my app could have solved that. I saw inefficiencies everywhere, overlapping stops, wasted miles, routes designed by someone who'd never driven them. My creation was still alive in my head, even if no one else cared. When my shift ended, I picked up Liam from the after-school program. He ran toward me with that same boundless energy, waving a piece of paper in his hand. "Look, Dad, I drew your truck. It was perfect. A boxy purple van with big letters that said FedEx and a stick figure waving from the driver's seat. Looks just like me, I said, though he'd drawn me with superhero arms. He grinned. You're faster than all the other dads. I wanted to laugh, but the lump in my throat made it come out as a quiet hum. Yeah, maybe, I said. We stopped for pizza on the way home. He devoured 2 slices and told me about a science project involving vinegar and baking soda. I told him my day was good, that I liked being outside, that I was learning a lot. All technically true, just missing the part where I'd spent the afternoon wondering if ambition was a luxury I could no longer afford. When he fell asleep later that night, I sat by the window and looked at the lights blinking across the city. Each one represented someone else working late, someone chasing something that might not love them back. I thought about the pitch I never got to finish, the product demo that never launched, the boardroom I might never see again. Then I thought about Liam's drawing, the purple truck, the stick figure smiling, and realized maybe for now, this was the job that mattered. The weeks blurred together. Routine became comfort. I learned the best parking spots, the store clerks who signed quickly, the dogs who didn't bark. I learned to time my lunch between school zones and delivery surges. On good days, I caught the sunset in my side mirror, orange bleeding into violet over the highway. And somewhere in that monotony, a strange peace began to form. Not contentment, not yet, but a quiet sort of acceptance. It was on one of those average Thursdays, during my second month, that something unexpected broke through the sameness. I had 2 deliveries left before clock out. The rain had started, a light drizzle that turned the pavement glossy. I pulled into a residential street lined with oak trees and expensive sedans. The kind of neighborhood where the lawns had their own lighting. That's when I saw her. A woman in a beige coat was crouched by a storm drain, one hand covering her mouth, the other gripping a little girl's shoulder. Her blonde hair was damp, her voice shaky. The girl, maybe 7 or 8, was crying softly, clutching a pink backpack. I slowed the van, checked the address on my scanner, and realized this was my next stop. When I stepped out, the woman looked up, panic in her eyes. Oh my God, please tell me you have something. A stick, a hanger, anything. My car keys fell down there. Her voice was trembling, but there was a certain grace to it, like someone not used to losing control. I set the package down on the curb and looked toward the drain. Sure enough, a glint of silver lay just out of reach beneath the grate. Hang on, I said. Don't ruin your coat. I'll get it. She blinked, surprised. You don't have to. Lady, I interrupted, already kneeling on the wet pavement. I've got a son who'd be mad if I let someone's mom cry over keys. That made the girl stop sniffling for a second. The woman laughed nervously. I appreciate it, but it's filthy down there. Good thing my job's not about staying clean, I said, lying flat to reach into the drain. As I stretched my arm down, the rain started to fall harder, cold and clean. The concrete was slick beneath my forearm, the metal rough against my fingertips. I could just brush the edge of the key ring, but not quite grip it. Almost got it, I muttered. Thank you, she said quietly, her voice steadier now. You didn't have to stop. I've got time, I said, eyes still on the drain. Besides, days like this, doing something useful feels better than doing something important. She looked at me strangely, like she was trying to place the weight behind that line. I didn't know it then. Not yet, but the woman kneeling beside me was Helen, the same assistant CEO whose company had rejected my project without a second thought. And right there, in the middle of the rain and the hum of streetlights, fate had just placed us on the same curb again. Only this time, I wasn't the one reaching for a lifeline. Rain has a way of slowing the world down, of stripping everything down to what really matters. That afternoon, it was the kind that fell soft but steady, blurring edges and soaking through collars before you noticed. I was flat on the ground, arm jammed into a storm drain, when I heard the woman let out a nervous laugh, the kind people use when they've run out of control and pride at the same time. Oh God, I'm such an idiot, she said, pressing a trembling hand to her forehead. I dropped them. I tripped, and now my daughter's scared, and my car's locked, and it's all right, I said, voice muffled by the pavement. We've all had one of those days. Beside her, the little girl sniffled and wiped her nose on her sleeve. Mom, is he gonna get them? I think so, sweetheart, the woman said softly, glancing down at me. He's trying. She was right. I was trying. My fingers brushed against the key ring again, this time catching the edge. I held my breath, twisting my wrist until I felt the cold metal press into my palm. The ring slipped once, then again, and I almost lost it to the water. Almost there, I muttered. The woman knelt beside me, gripping the edge of the drain as if she could will the keys upward through sheer force of apology. I could smell her perfume under the rain, something faint and expensive, out of place next to wet asphalt. Got it, I said finally, pulling my arm free and holding up the keys like a trophy. Her relief came out as a shaky laugh. You're a miracle worker. Just a guy with long arms, I said, smiling. She took the keys and looked at me, really looked at me this time. Up close, I could see that she wasn't much older than me, maybe early 30s. Her blonde hair was pinned up but starting to fall loose in the rain, and her gray eyes had that mixture of stress and sharpness that comes from running something big. Thank you, she said, sincerity breaking through her businesslike tone. You didn't have to do that. I shrugged, wiping my hand on my damp uniform pants. If I walked away, I'd have to explain to my kid why someone's mom had to fish keys out of a drain in the rain. I like my life simple. She smiled at that, the first real smile of the afternoon. That's kind. I picked up the delivery package from the curb and scanned it. Helen, right? I asked, reading the name on the label. Yes, she said, surprised. And you are? Otis Walker, I said, handing her the box. FedEx. Something flickered in her eyes. Wait. Otis Walker. Yeah, I said. You've probably seen 1,000 delivery guys, but I'm honored to be one of them. Her expression changed then, not recognition exactly, but a kind of dawning unease, like her mind was replaying a name she'd read somewhere recently. What did you say your first name was? She asked, her voice suddenly careful. Otis, I repeated, half grinning. I know, not the most modern name. My mom liked old records. Her lips parted as if she were about to say something, then closed again. She looked down at the keys in her hand. You said your son. How old is he? 8, I said, glancing at the small pink backpack in her daughter's grip. Yours? 7, she said. Emily. Emily smiled shyly at me, still clutching her mother's sleeve. Thank you for saving our car. Anytime, I said, kneeling down to her level. You just tell your mom to keep a tighter grip next time, okay? She giggled, and even Helen's shoulders loosened a little. As I stood, she tilted her head. You said you moved here recently? Yeah, I said, rubbing the back of my neck. Had a meeting with a big firm a while back. Thought it was going to be the start of something good. Turns out they didn't see it that way. I'm sorry, she said softly. What kind of meeting? I laughed under my breath. Startup pitch. Logistics platform. Real glamorous stuff. I think they decided they had enough dreamers already. Her eyes widened slightly. What was it called? Route Logic, I said. Helps drivers like me cut wasted miles. Makes deliveries faster and saner. Guess I'm still field testing it, just with less funding. For a heartbeat, she froze. Then her voice dropped almost to a whisper. Otis, you pitched that to Lamberton Group, didn't you? I frowned, thrown off. Yeah. Wait, how did you? She looked away, her voice tight. I work there. I'm deputy CEO. My heart gave one slow, deliberate thump. The rain seemed to fade for a second, replaced by the sound of irony laughing somewhere over our heads. Well, I said finally, a half smile tugging at my mouth. Guess it's a small world after all. She opened her mouth, searching for words. Otis, I didn't know. I didn't handle your case personally, but I remember the memo. There were discussions. It might have been a mistake. Maybe, I said. But that's how it goes sometimes. I'm not bitter. I glanced down at the drain. I've had worse days. At least this one had a happy ending. Helen looked at me, rain dripping from her lashes. You really won't let me make it up to you? I shook my head. No need. I just figured if I was going to crawl through the dirt for someone, might as well be for a good reason. She gave me a look I couldn't quite read. Part guilt, part admiration, part something softer. Otis, she said finally, I hope we meet again. I nodded toward her car. If you drop anything else expensive, you know who to call. That made her laugh, and this time it sounded real, light, unguarded. As I walked back to my van, the rain slowed to a drizzle. In the side mirror, I saw Helen watching me for a few seconds before getting into her Mercedes. I didn't know what she was thinking, maybe nothing, maybe everything. But I knew one thing. Fate had a sense of humor. And sometimes, it dropped the keys right where you could find them, if you were willing to get your hands dirty. The rain hadn't stopped. It had only softened, the way it does when a storm decides to take a breath before moving on. The street glistened like glass, puddles catching reflections of headlights that passed too fast. I stood beside my van, shaking water from my sleeves, when I heard her voice again. Otis, wait. I turned. Helen was jogging toward me, one hand gripping her purse, the other waving her key fob to lock the Mercedes. Her blonde hair was damp now, curling at the ends. Her daughter sat safely in the car, watching through the window. Hey, I said, forcing a smile. You sure you want to stay out here? You're going to ruin that coat. It's just a coat, she said, stopping a few feet away. I wanted to thank you properly. I shrugged. You already did. Twice, I think. She shook her head. No, I mean really. You went out of your way for me. Most people wouldn't. Maybe most people don't have a kid watching how they handle strangers, I said, glancing toward the car. That earned me a small smile, though her eyes didn't quite relax. You said your son's 8? Yeah, Liam. He must be proud of you. I laughed under my breath. He thinks I drive the world's fastest truck, so yeah, I guess he's proud. That made her laugh too, the kind of small, genuine sound that slices through tension. She looked down at the pavement, then back at me, her voice softer now. Otis, about your project. Route Logic, right? Yeah, I said cautiously. The one that didn't exactly light up your boardroom. She winced. That decision wasn't entirely fair. I remember seeing your proposal. You weren't supposed to be dismissed like that. Dismissed, I repeated, smiling faintly. That's a polite word for it. She folded her arms, the rain soaking into the sleeves of her coat. You know, when I saw your name on that delivery box earlier, I had this strange feeling. Like I'd seen it before, somewhere important. I just couldn't place it until you mentioned the project. I nodded, silent. I'm sorry, she said finally, and her voice broke on the word in a way that caught me off guard. Not just for what happened, for how it happened. That kind of rejection, it shouldn't feel personal. But we made it personal when we didn't even look you in the eye. I didn't know what to say. For months, I'd been waiting for someone from that company to explain what went wrong. Now, standing in the rain beside a storm drain, I didn't feel vindicated, just tired. It's fine, I said. Life moves on. So do trucks. Maybe, she said. But not everyone keeps their grace when it does. That line lingered between us. For a while, we just listened to the rain. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. A door slammed. The city kept breathing. She seemed to study me then. Not like an executive analyzing a pitch, but like a person trying to understand something she hadn't expected to find. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. If they called you tomorrow, she began slowly, and said they'd made a mistake, that they wanted you to come in and discuss a new role, something to rebuild your idea inside the company, would you take it? I looked at her for a long time before answering. No. Her brows furrowed. No. I shook my head. I can't build something meaningful in a place that didn't value it the first time, or in a place that only sees you once you're wearing the uniform of a guy who helps in the rain. She exhaled, a mix of surprise and admiration. You really mean that? Yeah, I said, tucking the scanner back into my belt. Some lessons you only learn once. Helen nodded slowly, then glanced toward her car. Through the window, her daughter was drawing something on the fogged-up glass with her finger, a smiley face. You know, she said quietly. Emily's father left when she was 2. She's never seen me ask anyone for help. Today she did. That matters. Her words caught me in the chest, the way truth does when you're not expecting it. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the exhaustion under the polish, the loneliness behind the control. I'm glad she saw you get the help you needed, I said gently. That's not weakness, Helen. That's human. She blinked away, something in her eyes. You really don't know how rare that kind of kindness is, do you? I just know it costs less than regret. For a moment, she smiled again, this time small and sad. Then she extended her hand. Well, Mr. Walker, if you ever change your mind, call me. I owe you one. I shook her hand, warm, steady despite the rain. You don't owe me anything. Just drive safe. And hold on to your keys this time. That made her laugh again, light and genuine. As I turned to leave, she called after me, Hey, Otis? Yeah. You're wrong about one thing. What's that? Some things are worth learning twice. I didn't have a clever answer for that. I just smiled, waved, and climbed back into my van. As I pulled away, the rain cleared into mist. In the rearview mirror, I caught one last glimpse of her, standing in the soft glow of her headlights, coat-drenched, eyes following the van until I turned the corner. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel rejected. I felt seen. The rain had stopped by morning, but its smell still clung to the air, that clean, sharp scent that makes the city feel half-washed, half-tired. I'd slept maybe 4 hours, but I couldn't shake the image of her face under the streetlight. The surprise, the guilt, the strange tenderness behind her apology. Helen, Deputy CEO. The woman who'd helped bury my dream without ever looking me in the eye. Funny how life works. 1 month I'm rehearsing pitches and mirror reflections, and the next I'm fishing car keys out of a drain for the person who signed the rejection. I kept thinking about what she said, that maybe it had been a mistake, that not everyone inside that company agreed with the decision. I didn't want to believe her. I'd learned the hard way that regret only shows up when someone's conscience does. And conscience usually comes late. Still, something about her voice lingered. She hadn't been defensive. She sounded human. At noon, I was parked behind a grocery store loading dock, eating a sandwich that tasted like cardboard and exhaustion when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me swipe. Otis Walker? The voice was calm, professional, too familiar. This is he. This is Helen Matthews, she said, hesitation softening the edges of her words. From yesterday. I swallowed. Didn't expect to hear from you this soon. You drop your keys again. She laughed quietly. No, not yet. I just wanted to say I spoke with my team this morning. I asked them to revisit your project, or at least your proposal. I leaned back in the seat, staring at the wet asphalt outside the windshield. You didn't have to do that. I know, she said, but I wanted to. I read through the full brief this time. I think we were too quick to pass on it. I'd like to meet again, off the record, just to talk. Talk about what? About possibilities, she said. Maybe not the same contract, but a position. Something you can grow from. Her tone was steady, but there was something else behind it. That quiet urge of someone trying to make things right before the guilt settled in. I let the silence stretch for a few seconds. I appreciate it, I said finally. Really? But I can't take that offer. There was a pause. Why not? Because the only reason you're offering it now, I said, is because I pulled your keys out of a drain. That's not fair. No, I agreed, but it's true. She exhaled. Otis, that's not what this is. I made a mistake, and I'm trying to correct it. Maybe, I said, but here's the thing. If I'd walked into that same boardroom today with the same idea, the same pitch, the same fire, and without the mud on my sleeves, you'd still say no. And I'd still be back in this van. Her voice dropped. You really think we only value people in suits? I glanced down at my uniform, the name patch already fraying at the edge. I think people only notice you once you're useful to them. Yesterday, I was a problem. Today, I'm a story you can tell yourself about compassion. She didn't speak for a long time. When she did, her voice was soft, the kind of soft that tries not to break. You're right. But I'm still asking. That's kind, I said. But I'm not for hire. Not like that. She sighed, quiet, heavy. Then at least promise me something. What's that? Don't stop pushing your idea, she said. You were right about it. You saw something we didn't. The market's shifting, you'll find your place. Her words weren't corporate this time. They were human, almost pleading. I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to hang up and forget she'd ever called. Another part, the part that still believed people could change, wanted to believe she meant it. Maybe someday, I said finally. But if I do, it won't be because a company believed in me. It'll be because I did. Helen was quiet for a beat. You really are something else, Otis. Just a guy with bills, I said. She laughed, quietly, sincerely. I'll take that. Before we hung up, she said, for what it's worth, Emily still talks about you. She told her teacher you saved her mom. She made it sound heroic. I smiled despite myself. Tell her I said hi, and that her mom did most of the saving. When the call ended, I sat in the silence of the van, engine off, the sandwich forgotten. For the first time since losing that contract, I didn't feel anger. What I felt was cleaner, a strange kind of peace. Because in that one phone call, I'd realized something I hadn't known before. Rejection can sting, but sometimes it also scrubs you down to who you really are. And who I was, right then, was a man who didn't need validation to keep driving forward. That night, when I picked Liam up, he was grinning ear to ear. Guess what, he said. I scored 8 points at practice. 8. I said, smiling. That's more than my paycheck per hour. He laughed, and I let him talk all the way home about jump shots and sneakers. The road shimmered with the reflection of streetlights on wet asphalt, and for the first time in months, it didn't look like failure. It looked like motion. Sometimes, that's all you need. 2 days later, the envelope came. No logo, no personal note, just a plain white envelope with my name typed neatly across the front. Inside was a single page on company letterhead, formal invitation to discuss potential collaboration opportunities. I didn't need to guess who sent it. I could practically hear Helen's careful voice between the lines, professional but personal, trying not to sound like charity. For a few minutes, I just sat in my van, the paper resting on my knees, the engine humming quietly. I could have torn it up. I could have called her. I could have walked into that glass building and shaken hands like nothing had ever happened. But I didn't. Because dignity isn't a speech you give. It's a line you stop crossing when no one else is watching. By the end of that week, I delivered packages to doctors, baristas, retirees, and people who never looked up from their phones. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. Every signature was proof of movement, proof that I was still doing something that mattered to someone, even if they didn't realize it. Still, I couldn't lie. Part of me was curious about what Helen thought she could offer. On Friday, I found out. I was sorting the last round of deliveries in the back of the warehouse when my supervisor, Rick, called out, "Hey, Walker, someone's here for you." I turned and saw her, Helen, standing by the loading dock, out of place among the smell of diesel and cardboard. She was wearing a tan coat and holding a coffee tray like a peace offering. "Hope I'm not interrupting," she said, smiling carefully. "You're not," I said, "but you're about to make every guy in here jealous." That earned a small laugh. She handed me one of the coffees. "Truce." I took it. "Depends what's in it." "Just caffeine," she said, "and maybe a little regret." I smirked. "Regret's free. You didn't have to bring it." We stood there for a few seconds, steam rising between us in the cool air. She finally said, "I didn't want to do this over email. I wanted to talk face to face." "You already did," I said. "In the rain." "I know," she said quietly, "but I wasn't clear enough. I looked into your project again. It's good, Otis. Really good. My team agrees. We want to fund a pilot. Not as charity, as a business decision. You'd be in charge of implementation." I stared at her. "You're serious?" "Yes." I leaned against a stack of packages, taking a slow sip of coffee. "That's generous." "But no." Her eyes widened. "You're turning it down?" "I am." "Why?" "Because this isn't how I want it," I said. "If I take it now, it's not because the idea worked. It's because you feel bad. I don't want to be the guy someone hired to ease their conscience." Her voice dropped. "You think this is about guilt?" "I think it's about timing," I said. "And timing tells you everything about sincerity." Helen looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. She just stared at me for a long time, eyes glassy but steady. "You know," she said, "most people would have jumped at this chance. Most people haven't been told their dream wasn't worth the meeting," I said, and then had to smile delivering boxes to the same people who said no. She winced. "That's not fair." "No, it's not," I said. "But life rarely is. What matters is how you walk through it." She looked down at the coffee in her hand. "You're really not going to change your mind?" I shook my head. "You once taught me something, even if you didn't mean to." "What's that?" "That there's no such thing as small people, only small vision." That landed harder than I expected. She blinked, lips parting slightly, like she wanted to apologize again, but couldn't find the words. "Otis," she said softly, "you're a good man." I smiled faintly. "Try telling the guys who cut me off on the highway this morning." That broke the tension. She laughed, really laughed, the kind that sounds like someone remembering how. She set her coffee down and extended her hand. "Then at least let me say this. I'm rooting for you, wherever you end up." I shook her hand. "I'll take that." As she turned to leave, the warehouse light caught her hair, throwing gold highlights against the dull gray air. For a second, she didn't look like a deputy CEO. She looked like someone who'd just remembered what decency felt like. When the door closed behind her, I stood there for a moment, holding the now empty cup, thinking about how strange redemption could look. Not grand, not cinematic, just quiet, honest moments between two people who learned something from each other the hard way. That night, when I tucked Liam into bed, he asked, "Dad, did you get your old job back?" I smiled. "No, buddy. But I think I got something better. What's that? Peace of mind. He nodded like he understood, even though he couldn't possibly, and maybe that was enough. Because some lessons you don't explain. You just live them until they stick. The months that followed felt different, not like recovery, not quite victory either. Just steady ground. After years of chasing something that kept slipping away, there was something sacred in simple stability. I still wore the FedEx uniform every morning. I still scanned packages, double-parked in awkward alleys, and said thank you to people who barely glanced up. But now, it didn't feel like a step backward. It felt like a pause, a season between storms. Most evenings, I'd come home to Liam sitting cross-legged on the couch, watching those engineering videos he liked. He'd tell me about how turbines worked or how trucks shifted weight when they turned corners, and I'd listen, pretending to understand, even though my brain was somewhere between route maps and prototype sketches. Because I hadn't stopped building. I couldn't. Every night after Liam went to bed, I opened my laptop and tweaked the algorithm, reworking the predictive routes, cleaning the UI, rewriting parts of the driver interface from scratch. I didn't have a team or funding, but I had time and discipline. And those were currencies that no company could take from me. Sometimes, I think about Helen. Not in the way that makes you miss someone, but in the way you remember a turning point. She had become a symbol of everything the world tried to teach me about pride, compassion, and second chances, all tangled into one rainy afternoon. Once, out of habit, I scrolled through the Lamberton Group's website and saw her face in an article about corporate transparency. She looked confident, polished, and exactly as I remembered, but her eyes in that photo weren't the same as the woman who'd stood in a warehouse and apologized. I smiled at the irony and closed the page. By spring, my new version of Route Logic was nearly complete. The test data showed cleaner performance than ever, 30% fewer delays, 20% less fuel waste. I'd integrated live weather mapping and real-time driver feedback. It wasn't just an app anymore. It was a living system. I started small, local courier firms, one-man operations that couldn't afford big logistics software. I sent cold emails, attached screenshots, and offered free trial periods. Most didn't reply. A few did, and those few were enough. The first to test, it was a delivery contractor in Dallas named Benny, who'd been running his routes by instinct for 20 years. After a week using my system, he called me at 10 p.m., his voice gruff but grateful. "Walker," he said, "I don't know what you built, but I just saved 2 hours and half a tank of gas. I owe you a beer." That beer never happened, but his testimonial did. And that was the first domino. One by one, small courier firms started reaching out. Word spread. Nothing viral, nothing flashy, just whispers in workrooms and driver lounges. And in those quiet months, life began to rebuild itself, piece by piece, route by route. Liam noticed it before I did. "Dad," he said one night, "you smile more lately." "Do I?" I asked, shutting the laptop. "Yeah, you used to look tired all the time. Now you just look focused." I laughed. "That's what old people call peace, kiddo." He frowned. "You're not old." "I am when I bend down to tie my boots," I said. He laughed, that wide, unfiltered kind of laugh that makes the worst day worth it. I realized that, for all the time I'd spent chasing success, this was the part that felt like winning. The nights that didn't need saving, the meals that didn't need explaining, the air that didn't feel heavy. 6 months after the day I handed Helen her keys, I opened an email that made me sit back and just stare. The subject line read, "Approved, Partnership Review, Ridgepoint Logistics." Ridgepoint, a mid-sized freight company I'd applied to on a whim months earlier, pitching them on using my system to optimize their last-mile routes. I'd forgotten I even sent it. I clicked it open. "Mr. Walker, we've reviewed your platform and are interested in scheduling a call to discuss potential integration into our delivery operations. Your solution aligns with our current goals for 2026. Please confirm availability for next week." For a moment, I didn't breathe. Then I laughed, loud, half in disbelief. Liam peeked out from his room, toothbrush still in hand. "What's so funny?" he asked. "Nothing," I said, grinning. "Just timing." He tilted his head. "Good timing or bad timing?" "The kind that makes the bad kind worth it." That night, after he fell asleep, I sat at the table and opened my laptop again. I reread the email twice, then clicked reply. "Thank you for the opportunity. I'm available anytime next week. Looking forward to the conversation." Before hitting send, I paused, not out of doubt, but gratitude. Gratitude that sometimes the world doesn't need to fix itself right away. Sometimes it just needs to give you a little space to build your own version of justice. I sent the email, leaned back in the chair, and looked at the ceiling. The hum of the refrigerator mixed with the distant sound of traffic, the quiet music of normal life. For the first time in years, I didn't feel behind schedule. The call with Ridgepoint happened on a Wednesday morning, the kind of ordinary day that ends up changing everything. Liam was already at school, and I was sitting at our kitchen table, a mug of reheated coffee beside my laptop, wearing the same navy polo I wore on delivery shifts. No suit, no stage, no crowd. Just me, my idea, and a screen full of faces who didn't know my story. The woman leading the call, a logistics director named Renee, got straight to it. "We've tested your demo, Mr. Walker. The algorithm's accuracy is impressive. How long have you been developing this?" 3 years, I said, trying to sound calm. 2 of those without funding. Her brows lifted slightly. "You built this alone?" "With help from YouTube tutorials and Insomnia," I said. That made her laugh. We spent the next 40 minutes going over details, efficiency rates, regional data mapping, scalability projections. And somewhere between her third question and my second screen share, I realized something. I wasn't nervous. Not this time. Not like before. Because this time, I wasn't begging anyone to believe in me. I was just explaining something that already worked. By the end of the meeting, Renee leaned back in her chair. "Otis, I think we can move forward with a pilot partnership. I'll send over the paperwork today." I nodded, smiling. "Sounds good." But when the screen went dark, I didn't jump up or shout or fist pump. I just sat there, still, quiet, feeling that deep, clean kind of joy that doesn't rush you. I looked around our small apartment. The half-folded laundry on the couch, Liam's backpack by the door, a Lego truck on the floor. All the things that had stayed with me when everything else didn't. This was my success. Not the title, not the validation, but the endurance. That evening, I took Liam out for burgers, the good kind, the ones wrapped in foil that leak down your wrist. "You're smiling weird," he said between bites. "What happened?" "Just a work thing," I said. "Might be a new project coming up." "Big one." "Yeah," I said. "Big enough to change a few things." He nodded solemnly, chewing. "Can I still help test the app?" "You'll be my lead tester," I said. "You're already the reason it works." He grinned, and in that grin, I saw everything that had kept me from quitting. A week later, the partnership was official. Ridgepoint listed me as independent product developer. My inbox filled with onboarding forms and scheduling requests, and my brain buzzed with more excitement than I'd felt in years. And then, out of nowhere, came one last echo from the past. An email from Helen Matthews. "Otis, I heard about your partnership with Ridgepoint. Congratulations, truly. You deserved this long before anyone realized it. I'm proud of what you built. Wishing you and your son all the success in the world." No hidden message, no pitch, no invitation, just grace. I reread it twice, then replied, "Thank you, Helen. Timing right." Her response came 5 minutes later. "Exactly. Sometimes life waits until we're ready to receive what was ours all along." 3 months into the Ridgepoint deal, I stood in front of a small team of drivers in a warehouse not unlike the one I used to work in. This time, I wasn't wearing the uniform. I was leading the training session, walking them through how to use my app. One of the older drivers raised his hand. "You made this yourself?" "Yeah," I said. "Started in my kitchen. Kept breaking it until it worked." He nodded slowly. "That's the best kind of work. The kind that hurts first." I smiled. "You're not wrong." Afterward, as I stepped outside, I caught a glimpse of the sunset stretching over the lot, gold spilling into the horizon, trucks glinting in the light. And I thought about every version of myself that had gotten me here. The man pitching in a borrowed suit, the man on his knees at a storm drain, the man in a van scanning packages with a tired smile. They were all still part of me. Months later, I found myself back at that same intersection where I'd first met Helen, the one with the drain and the oak-lined street. I was dropping off a package nearby when I saw a familiar white Mercedes turn the corner. It slowed beside me, the window rolling down. Helen smiled from the driver's seat, her daughter waving enthusiastically from the back. "Mr. Walker," Emily called. "Mom says you're famous now." I laughed. "Hardly. Just busier." Helen leaned toward the window. "You look good, Otis. How's life treating you?" "Fairly. I said, with a nod. Guess life finally learned some manners. She laughed, soft, genuine, the kind that carried warmth instead of distance. Well, she said, looks like you finally got the keys to your future. I grinned. Didn't even have to crawl through a drain for them this time. We both laughed, and for a brief moment, the world felt balanced. Two people who had collided at the worst time, now meeting again when they'd both learned what grace really meant. She waved goodbye, and as her car disappeared around the bend, I stood there a little longer, letting the evening wind brush against my face. Sometimes life gives you success. Sometimes it gives you closure. And sometimes, when you're lucky, it gives you both. There's a certain peace that comes after the noise, the kind that doesn't need to be announced or proved. That's the peace I found, months after everything settled. Our little apartment didn't change much, but the way it felt did. The nights were quieter. The air was lighter. Liam still left his shoes in the hallway and his cereal bowl in the sink, but now, those small messes felt like trophies of a life finally working as it should. I'd spend mornings answering emails, managing my growing client list, and then switch over to dad mode, packing lunches, helping with math homework, driving him to soccer. I was still the same man who once knelt by a drain to help a stranger, but the weight on my shoulders wasn't the same anymore. Sometimes, I'd catch myself wondering how different things might have been if I'd said yes that day in the warehouse. If I'd taken Helen's offer, swallowed my pride, and walked back into that company. Maybe the road would have been shorter, maybe the checks would have been bigger. But then I look at how it all unfolded, slowly, honestly, with a little bit of pain and a lot of faith. And I realize this was the only way it could have worked. Because there's something sacred about earning back your dignity, about rebuilding yourself with your own two hands. One evening, Liam and I drove down to the pier. He wanted ice cream, and I just wanted air. The sun was sliding into the water, painting everything gold. Out of nowhere, he said, "Dad, do you ever miss your old job?" I thought for a second. Sometimes, but not the part where people decided my worth for me. He nodded, like he understood. Mom would have been proud, huh? I swallowed. Yeah, I said quietly. I think she would have. We stood there for a while, watching the light fade. He leaned against me, still small enough to rest his head on my arm. I realized he didn't just see me as his dad. He saw me as proof that life could go wrong and still turn out right. Later that night, back home, I got a message request on LinkedIn from someone at Lamberton Group, a young analyst who said she'd heard my name from Helen. She wrote, "Your story made the rounds here. It reminded a lot of us to lead with empathy. You changed how we treat people." I just stared at it for a while before replying. Kindness costs less than regret. And that was that. People think redemption is about getting even or proving them wrong. But that's not it. Redemption is when you can look at the people who once overlooked you and feel nothing but calm. It's when you stop needing to be understood and start being grateful that you survived being misunderstood. And maybe that's what Helen learned too. Because sometimes, you're not the villain or the hero. You're just two people who met each other in the middle of life's storm, and each walked away a little wiser. Now, when people ask about my story, about how the delivery guy ended up running a logistics startup, I tell them the truth. It wasn't luck. It wasn't timing. It was grace. Grace from strangers. Grace from failure. Grace from the quiet belief that life doesn't end just because something broke. That's what I want Liam to remember most. Not the struggle, not the rejections, but the way we kept moving. The way every setback secretly built the road to something better. Final narration. In the style of Voices of Auntie May YouTube outro. Life has a way of teaching us humility long before it gives us reward. Otis learned that sometimes the road to success runs through disappointment, and sometimes dignity is worth more than any title. He never forgot the woman by the storm drain, or the look in her eyes when she realized who he was. And she, in turn, never forgot the man who knelt in the rain and helped her without asking for anything back. Months later, as he built something lasting and honest, the world finally caught up to what he'd always known. That kindness doesn't make you weak. It makes you unstoppable. So if you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or told your dream wasn't worth the time, remember this. The people who once looked down on you might one day have to look up just to say thank you. Would you have walked away like Otis did? Tell me in the comments. And if this story made you think, subscribe. There's more to come every week.